my name is Tuppence. So this week I am doing some flowers again. I am very much in the spring mode, but also this week, in fact tomorrow, is my mum's birthday. She's going to be 83 and I like to give her some flowers either on her birthday or Mother's Day or both. Irises are February's birth flower, and I found a set of flowers on Creative Fabrica and I used it to create this file. So I'll show you how I did that in a minute. But if you're interested in getting your hands on this, I will leave a link in the description box below and you can grab it. Now, if you don't have a laser cutter, that's fine. You can do this out of paper using a Cricut. Perhaps you wouldn't be able to do the little intricate flower itself, but the whole rest of it, the mason jar, everything else, you absolutely could. You could stack the paper and then create your own bezels. I've shown that before on my channel. So if you want to get hold of this file, I will leave a link to that in the description box below, along with any other supplies that I'm using and I can find the links to. Alright, so before I start to put this together, I need to paint this and seal the wood. I'm planning on putting some resin in the mason jar, and I need to make sure that the wood is completely sealed before I do that, otherwise it will cause bubbles in the resin. So I'm going to go ahead and take these out to my shed. I'm going to spray paint everything so that it will be nice and sealed and ready to accept some paint. And before I do that, I'm going to show you how I cut this file out. This is Xtool Creative Space, and this is the inside of my laser with the wood placed in it. I'm just going to arrange all of the pieces on that wood so that I make maximum use of the space that I've got. Just put this last one and tuck that in there. Now, in order to tell it whether I want to cut or engrave or score, I need to first select the material that I'm going to be using. So all I have to do is go up to this drop down box and select Basswood 3mm, which is what I've got. And now the letters, I want those to score or engrave. I'm going to choose score, and I'm going to leave it on the suggestions that it gives me for that material. But the heart itself and that dot, I'm going to select those because I want those to cut. Now you can choose from the suggestions that it gives you, but I already know what I need to use for my laser. So I'm going to change this to 80 and I'll set the speed to 10, and I'm going to give this 2 passes. Alright, and I now just need to do the same for the rest. I'm going to change that from engrave to cut, and again change the parameters 80, 10 and 2. Now this is all set up and ready to go. If I want to see where it's going to cut, then I just need to press the framing button and then click the button on the front of the machine. But I'm going to click process, which is going to open up another screen. And again, you have the option to frame it from here just to check that everything fits in space. But I'm going to click start, and then I'll click the button on the front of my machine and it will start the process. This is what it looks like in real time. And this is me speeding it up 6.5 times. So I'll leave this to cut out, and as you could see, I managed to get everything that I needed onto one sheet with some space to spare. Well, these are all dry now. They've had a thorough coating of an acrylic spray primer. The spray paint made it much easier to ensure that I coated the inside edges, especially of all the small pieces. But it's a little bit of a dark grey, so I'm going to use this grey acrylic paint. It's from a company called Fantastory, and I got them off of Amazon to replace all of my dried up paints, but I can't say that I actually recommend them. They're a little bit kind of gel-like. Yeah, I certainly wouldn't recommend using these. But I'm just going to go over the surface of this and try and brighten it up. I'll do both of them, but I only need to do one side, as the other side is going to be hidden when it's glued together. I'm using a sponge to apply this, gently tapping, and then I'll see if this just brightens that grey up a little bit. Now for the other side, I'm going to need to apply some varnish, but before I can do that, I need these to dry thoroughly. I'm also going to want to paint my leaves. Before I do that though, I need to make sure that I'm painting the right side. I'm not going to bother to paint both sides because I'm going to stick them down. So let me just check that I've got the right side, and this is the one that I want to paint, and I'll do the same with that in a minute. Now I've got this green. Again, it's from that same pack. So I'm going to give this a go and see how it works. It's looking a little bit dark, so I'm just thinking that I might blend that on my mat. I've got a silicone mat here. Yeah, that is pretty dark. I think I'm going to blend it with a little bit of this grey and just try and lighten it up a little bit. So let me try and squeeze a bit of the grey out. I'm just going to use the silicone mat as a palette, and then I can wipe that off with a baby wipe afterwards. Again, just use my sponge, mix that together and blend that in, and then I can just tap this down and paint. I don't want a thick layer, I just want to apply a little bit of colour. I've mixed up a little bit more paint, and now I'm going to paint the other side. Now it's not strictly necessary for me to paint the whole thing. I really only need to get some paint that's going to be behind those holes that are in the front leaves and along the stem. But I do want to be careful that I don't get it on the flower, as I'm going to add a different colour onto that. So once I've done these, I need to pop these over to the side and let them dry, and I'm going to do the same to the other flower and its leaves. The acrylic paint on these is now dry, and you really can't tell any difference. It doesn't look like I've painted them at all. It's dried much darker than I thought it would. So I'm just going to leave them as they are, but I do need to coat the back of them with this acrylic varnish. It's going to give me a nice, smooth, shiny surface that I can apply my bezel tape to, and hopefully I will get a really nice bond. If I was just to apply it to the paint, which is matte, it may not stick properly and I could end up with some gaps. By putting the varnish on, I kind of minimise that possibility. I'm going to give them a couple of coats, but I'm going to make sure that they dry in between each coat, and it doesn't take long. Acrylic varnish is water-based and it dries pretty quickly. While I'm waiting for that acrylic varnish to dry, I have this chrome marker from JDiction, and I'm using the gold. I'm going to colour in the top of the flower outlines. I'll also go around the outside edge as well. I do need to be really careful. These are incredibly thin and pretty bendy, very fragile, so I don't want to crack them. My pen is pretty old and it is running a little bit dry, but I should have enough colour in here to give these a couple of coats, and they are taking the colour really nicely. So these need about 20-25 minutes to dry, and then I can do the sides. Okay, these have had a couple of coats of varnish and I've made sure that it is thoroughly dry. It's time for me to apply the bezel tape. So I'm going to cut a strip and lay that down. This bezel tape is not wide enough to cover any of the areas in one go, so I need to overlap a couple of pieces. I'm just going to lay this beside that tape so that I can make sure that when I overlap this, I'm still going to have enough to cover all of the open areas. Just snip that off. And then I can gently lay this down, just a tiny overlap, and make sure that that is nice and straight. I've got a little bit of a wrinkle there, so I'm just going to separate those and let them lay down flat. Try and get it as wrinkle free as possible. Still causing a little bit of an issue there. Alright, just press that down, and now I'm going to place that varnish side down, the shiny side down, on top, and press that down with my fingers, trying not to put my fingers on the inside of that bezel tape, because you will leave a fingerprint behind and the resin will pick that up. So I'm going to flip that over, and then I can make sure that this is pressed down really well and it adheres all the way round onto that frame. Don't want any bubbles, any wrinkles. Just spend a little time making sure that that's really adhered down well. Okay, I'm going to fold over the edges here so that I don't keep catching it with my fingers. This stuff is pretty sticky and it's going to stick to my gloves like crazy. So I'll just fold that over on top of itself. And that is pretty much ready to go. I'll just do the same to the other one. Now, because I've had to put an overlap in here, I've chosen to do it in the way that I have, so that if the line is picked up by the resin, which it could well be, it's going to look like a water line. This is meant to be a vase. It will just look like water in the vase. So let me grab some gloves and I'll be back. I've already mixed up my resin. I'm using the Apex 1 coat resin, which is a slightly thicker fast cure resin. I have 20 mils in here, and I don't know if that's going to be enough, but I just need a thin coat across the bottom of this. So as long as it touches the sides and gives me one even coat, that should be okay. And the reason I'm using this thicker fast cure is that it has less of a chance of leaking. If it's going to cure really quickly, not going to be in a fluid state that long, and being thicker, hopefully if there is any tiny gaps in this bezel tape, it's just not going to run through it. So I'm going to take my stick and just gently make sure that this is coating all of the sides, touching all the way up around the edge of the frame. I can smooth that out. Now I don't want to use a heat gun or anything like that to pop any bubbles, because I don't know how well this bezel tape will handle heat. I've also got this on my G3 creaming machine, but I'm not actually going to put that on. I'm just going to use it as a dust cover. So let me just make sure that this is all nice and smooth. You can see a lump in there, but I don't know if that's underneath it or in my resin. I think it's actually in my resin. Let me just grab a pair of tweezers and see if I can hook that out. Got it. I think it's a piece of dried resin. It probably came off of my stick because I've used that multiple times before. Alright, so now I have about 10 mil left. I've used about half of it, so I'm going to fill this one, and then I can make up just a little bit more that I can fill up these small areas at the top afterwards. So I'm going to scrape that out, and again it's the same process, making sure that that's smoothed out across the surface and it touches all sides of the frames. Try and get any bubbles out, and then I'm going to leave them to cure by themselves. So once I've done this, I will mix up a little bit more resin and I can fill the top piece. It's the same process, so I'm not going to show you that, and I'll be back when these are ready for me to demold. So I'll see you then. Okay, before I stick all of these together, I need to colour in my irises, and irises are usually a nice purple colour. So I have this mica powder which I'm going to use because I really do not like the paints that I have bought and I can't recommend them, so I'm not going to put their link in the description box below, but I do have some other acrylic paint. So I'm going to colour the whole thing in white, and then I will use the powder to kind of create an ombre effect and graduate the paint colour around the outside. So it's pretty self-explanatory what I'm going to do. I will pop on some music and paint these irises, and then I can start sticking everything together. paint is thoroughly dry now and I'm ready to stick these together. And because these pieces are so fine, the easiest way to do this is to lay down my glue onto my silicone mat. I'm using bookbinding glue, you can use wood glue. And now I'm going to smooth that out with my finger to create a puddle. And then I can just keep dabbing the flower into that glue, making sure that it is all covered on the back. And all I have to do now is just line it up on top of that flower and stick it in place. Just press it down gently, making sure that everything lines up. And then I need to leave that to dry. And that glue does not take very long at all. So again, I'm going to repeat the process with the other one. Now I need to be really careful because it's pretty sticky and these things are so fragile they will break. Make sure that it is coated in the glue. That looks pretty good. And then I can line this on top, and I'm really loving that gold outline with the purple underneath. Whoops, don't want to actually dip that in the glue. All right, my hands are very sticky. I'm going to go ahead and clean those. I'm also going to use that same glue to add my layer of leaves on top. So I'm applying it to the back of the cutout leaf. That way I don't put glue anywhere that is not going to be needed. Just put some dots on there and then I can spread that out with my finger. It's a water-based glue, so it will easily wash off with a little bit of soap and water. And then I can line my leaf up, make sure that it is all straight, because it is a pretty tight fit in the mason jar. So I do want to make sure everything is lined up nicely. And then I'm going to apply a little bit of pressure, hold this down for about a minute or so, and then I can just set it aside and leave it to cure. I'm going to do the same to the other leaf, and by that time the resin should be cured. The resin is set. I've taken the tape off of one and I'm going to show you how I do it with this one. So I pull the tape back so that it's almost laying flat onto the surface. I'm scraping my nails back on that surface and folding it over. That way all of the pressure is being exerted sideways and it's not pulling the resin upright. It could crack it, it could pull it away from the frame if it wasn't completely bonded, whereas this way none of the pressure is pulling up on that resin, it's all pulling sideways, pulling the tape off. And you can see it has not left any residue and it hasn't pulled any of the paint off of the frame. And this looks really nice, but I do want to just point out one thing. So let me see if I can get this to focus, and then hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm showing you. Up in this area there are a lot of bubbles, especially around where the edges are, and that's because I just could not get the paint in there properly to seal those pieces. You can see the rest of this is nice and clear. I do have one bubble in the middle, but otherwise it's really nice and clear and no bubbles. And that's because I was able to seal all of the inside edges of that frame with the paint, and none of the bubbles were able to be released from the wood. But here I just could not get the paint in there. So I'm not too fussed about that. Glassware does sometimes have bubbles in it, and actually I'm going to wrap a little bit of twine around that later anyway. So now I just need to put this together and assemble the whole piece. The jar is made up of the 2 resin pieces and these 4 filler pieces, which will accommodate the flowers in between. So I'm using the same bookbinding glue to stick these together, making sure that I accurately lay these on top of each other and that they are aligned perfectly. Once I have all of the glue in place, I'm going to put a small weight on top of these and just set this aside until the glue is hardened. Now I can attach the resin pieces, and because I've got a little bit of resin around the outside of that frame, I'm going to use super glue to join these pieces. Again, it's important that I align this accurately, otherwise I won't have enough room to fit the flowers in at the top. And the advantage of the super glue is that it dries almost instantly. Alright, Right, this is almost finished. I'm going to use a little bit of this twine so that I can tie on the tag. I'll just take a fairly long length and then I can wrap that around the top of the jar. That's going to hide some of those bubbles. So that's why I really wasn't that worried about them being in there. So I'll wrap that round a couple of times and then I can tie a knot in that and thread on the little hearts that I've made. I had to put a little bit of glue on the end of that twine just so that I can poke that through the hole. And there's a tag that says Mum. So I'm just going to tie a knot on this and then I'll snip off the ends. I'm not going to put a bow or anything like that. And then all I have to do is tuck in my flowers. So the gap at the top is made to fit exactly the width of the flowers and stop them from going too far down in the bottom. And then I just need to wriggle this second one in. It is a pretty tight fit, but it does fit in really nicely. And that is it. I'm really hoping that my mum likes these and that you do as well. And if you've liked this video, please go ahead and give me a thumbs up, comment, share, subscribe if you haven't, and you'll be able to come back and see what I'm going to make next time. I'm going to leave you with some photos, but until then, thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye.